You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Servati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special cybersecurity edition of the Big Cast. My name is John Best. I'm the CEO of Best Innovation Group, and I'm here with my constant cohort, my friend and partner in not cybercrime,
and cybersecurity dummy. I like to play the guy who doesn't know much,
Sure.
So I can kind of represent our audience and ask the silly questions.
Yeah, exactly. Glenn Servati, who's with me. And so Glenn, we kind of jumped in to do this pretty quickly because just a bunch of things were happening.
Yeah, we had plans to run a different episode this week around you coming, kind of going back and looking at your look in the future back from 2015, which we still will do. But this is just too time sensitive to pass up on. And it wasn't long after we recorded, and we got a couple updates on the OpenAI situation we'll get to as well. But it wasn't long after we recorded last week's episode that you sent me the first update on this ransomware attack that's hit some small credit unions.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So let's talk about it. So I'll start off with what do you know? What is it that you think Glenn?
Well, as is often the case, people are very cautious not to share too much, because if you let the cyber criminals know what you know, they can then act better.
And we only know what's out there. I have not spoken to anybody on the inside of this. So
I've had a couple of conversations, not with any credit unions directly. The only one that I've seen that's actually been willing to speak for the record, and Credit Union Today has done a great job on this, by the way, Frank Diekman. We'll post a link. He's had a couple stories on this.
No, Frank, yeah.
The Mountain Valley Credit Union in upstate New York, I guess right on the Vermont border, has been one of the ones that pointed this out. But apparently I heard either exactly or roughly 60 credit unions that have been knocked offline to some extent. And in the case of Mountain Valley, they've gone back to paper ledgers. They literally can't even get into their teller systems. Because of a ransomware attack. I did get confirmation, and this was actually printed as of Friday morning in Credit Union Today. The NCUA has confirmed this as well. Every affected credit union, the only ones affected are all under $100 million in assets. So it's a little bit comforting. It's a little bit of a smaller overall kind of breadth of the incident. But don't forget that roughly 70%, I believe, of credit unions have under 100 million. So it's not like these are the smallest of the small. They just happen to be not the big guys. In aggregate, they have 912 million in assets, which again, if you think about just under $1 billion, that would, if this was all one credit union, it would be like maybe the 500th or 600th biggest credit union in the country. So again, not huge.
Well, it affects. I mean, millions of people.
They had the number in there. Let me see if I can find it while we're talking. I think it was someplace in the 15,000 range of the number of members that were affected, or maybe it was even higher. I'll see if I can dig that up real quickly while we're talking. But yeah, obviously it affects people pretty dramatically, and it's a clear warning sign that this kind of thing can happen. You can't. Yeah. This is where it gets into, we don't know for a fact what the root cause was, but there's some natural inclinations.
Yeah, I'll throw out kind of what I know. So, and actually, let's start with what's on Ongoing Operations website that was posted yesterday, because let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They're right at the center of it. I think it's a great company. I've worked with them before. So
yeah, let's be clear on that. That piece is apparently public knowledge. Is that
right?
Ongoing Operations, which is a subsidiary of Trellance. Trellance acquired them. And by the way, I was low. 93,000 members across these 60 credit unions. Whether they're all feeling the pain, how many of them are primary account, primary relationships in terms of their deposit account, or how many of them are, loans and things like that, who knows? But 93,000 are actually out there. Yeah, Ongoing Operations is a subsidiary, and they appear to be kind of at the center of at least, all the vectors pointing to them as having had an issue.
Yeah. And so Ongoing posted this, and here's their important facts. On November 26th, Ongoing Operations experienced an isolated cybersecurity incident. Upon discovery, now this is an important concept. remember, when they say the 26th, I don't know that that means that they found it on the 26th or they found it later. So we don't know that.
Well, I'm guessing, and again, this is speculation, but I'm guessing in this case, unlike, they were probably in there earlier. The 26th is probably when the ransomware actually took effect.
Well,
they sent out the message saying, guess what, guys, your system's locked.
Well, I think this is a multiple step thing too, and
Yeah.
I'll get into that in just a minute with what the scuttlebutt is on some of the websites and whether that's true or not. You have to remember, again, Glenn and I only know what we can read, but I can technically transcribe it for the audience so that they know if it did go down this way, which there are multiple websites saying this is what likely happened. So they called law enforcement. That's great. They're reviewing the impacted data to determine exactly what information was impacted and to who that information belongs. So they are, that tells me that there is data that was of a secure nature that apparently was breached. I mean, that's what it sounds like, at least.
It does. It does.
The exact thing says, as part of our response to this instance, we are reviewing the impacted data to determine exactly what information was impacted and to whom that information belonged. So I guess you could say it isn't necessarily personal information. It could be like a list of checks, and the amounts that got sent back and forth between something. You have to remember there's a lot of data that goes back and forth. So I'm not going to say it's personal information.
And Trellance also made the point that if their customers have not heard from them, it means they were not affected.
Right.
And I'm talking credit union customers, because apparently it didn't hit every single customer of ongoing operations. I don't know what the secret sauce was of which ones happened to be unlucky, but roughly 60 or more.
The incident is isolated to a segment of the ongoing operations network, and their team's working around the clock, which means that it sounds like as of yesterday, this was still going on. They've notified all impacted customers. So they've talked to all the credit unions, I'm guessing. Anybody who's not received a notice, they weren't affected. The forensic investigation into the incident is ongoing. Ongoing. They continue to make progress in bringing back up the services, and they'll assist the impacted credit unions with member notification and will offer complimentary credit monitoring and identity restoration service to those who are impacted. So that does kind of say it's likely that there's some member data.
It does sound like it, but job one, I believe, is getting the darn core systems back online.
Yeah. So, and then you sent an article. And in the article, the credit union that you mentioned, this was an update November or December 4th. So if they discovered that it happened on the 26th, and we still don't know, it seemed like this happened last week. So it sounds like that they did find the timeline of when it first happened, and it happened on the 26th.
And the first I saw the news of it was last Friday, which would have been
me too.
The 1st of December. Hey, I saw it because you sent it to me. And it seemed like it's slowly but surely kind of working its way into the news cycle.
And this is a note from Mountain Valley. What'd you say it was? CFU. So Mountain Valley, whatever that is.
Federal Credit Union.
I would think maybe they got this backwards. It should be MVFCU, but whatever. Mountain Valley Federal Credit Union. It says attention. Members, we recently were informed our data processing solutions provider, FedComp data center, is experiencing technical difficulties and unavailable due to a ransomware attack impacting its parent company, Trellance. Our communication with the FedComp has been limited. However, we can share their forensic investigation is ongoing and restoration of the services is a high priority. Unfortunately, there's no timeline. Wow. Does this mean they're completely down, like you can't use your credit cards or anything? They got to be in stand-in, right?
Credit cards, I don't know. I'm pretty sure.
Well, if your core is down, you would be. I mean, if your core is down, then your only option is to be in stand-in, right? I mean, that's how it would have to work. You can't be up otherwise.
But again, I'm wondering, I mean, we're talking about credit unions under 100 million. How many of them are issuing their own credit cards? I'm guessing the credit cards are probably not.
Yeah, I think all of them, but or debit.
Credit cards, not debit.
Okay, let's call it debit. Let's say debit too.
Debit is definitely a problem. I agree with that.
Right. So if you have money in there and you were counting on it, you got none.
And no, again, let's be careful, because at least in this case, and from what I can tell, they are finding workarounds. They are working on payments. This is the old Jimmy Stewart. They've got the ledger out and they're handing the cash out. They
Yeah,
are
which is
finding
good.
ways to make this work.
Well, yeah, it's like a it's like an old school DR plan for, hey, what if everything goes really down, right? So as of today, their last update was yesterday. So let's look at their yesterday update. This is Mountain Valley Federal Credit Union. I was right. It's MVFCU. It says their systems are fully up and operational. Woohoo! Home banking.
Yay! Oh, that's wonderful.
But home banking is still down, but should be up sometime today. So I'm assuming it came back up yesterday, and they're back. So good for them. All right. So let's.
The NCUA did note in the most recent report that some were recovering and starting to come back online. So they hopefully, I mean, they seem to have been among the most aggressive and persistent in terms of really diving into this. So they may have been one of the biggest as well. I'm not sure, but good. Kudos to them. Glad, and it sounds like they've weathered the storm, which has got to be, oh man, a week they want to forget, or 10 days they want to forget.
Absolutely. I can't even imagine. It would be just horrible. But, unfortunately, it's becoming sort of a sign of the times, if you will. But so let me tell you what the people, in my research, what is being said happened. Now, specifically, I want to start off with this to say it very clearly that specifically right off the bat, ongoing operations in their December 7th release, which was yesterday, basically said, hey, there are some stories in the press that may lack accuracy or validation. They don't have control over that. So I'm going to share with you what I'm hearing, and it kind of could make some sense, but I'll throw it out there. This is all 1,000,000% speculation, but this is from what researchers say on the internet. So there's starting earlier this year, there was a new what they call a 0 day. Do you know what a 0 day is, Glenn?
I do. Hold on a second because I'm about to cough, but go ahead and tell them.
I'm waiting for you. Okay, you coughed. So a 0 day is a vulnerability in a piece of software or a piece of hardware or anything that no one knows about that is being used. So that means that you cannot prepare for it. That means that the company that made it doesn't know about it. And when you think about that, it's very prized. It's very prized by hackers, and specifically state hackers. So, for example, many years ago, the CIA left their toolkit out, and someone got a hold of it. Like they were using it, to get into something, and they left the toolkit out, and they found a bunch of what they call 0 days. And what the 0 day refers to, again, is the number of days that the software vendor has known about the problem. So, and in some cases, I guess you could call it like a negative day because they use them for a while and they don't tell anybody about them. And the reason they don't tell anybody about them is because if the vendor finds out, they will patch it and then they won't have this anymore. So a lot of times what will happen is someone will find this 0 day, and state factions, big hacker groups, they pay a lot of money for what are called 0 days. And if you could get a validated 0 day, that means that you have access, that no one else knows about it. That means that you can run around and hit these things. In this case, what they're saying that the 0 day vulnerability was in August was something called Citrix bleed. So let me explain what Citrix is to begin with, and then I'll explain the portion of it that they believe. So Citrix itself was a platform that was invented actually in Florida. I actually worked with the guys that actually initially put this together a long time ago. One of my guys from Suncoast actually went to work there. It was originally Zen Desktop, if you remember those, and Zen App. But the purpose of it was
pretty common application, pretty common.
It is, because what it does is it allows you to buy very, very inexpensive pieces of hardware and put them in, and then run a full desktop. But that desktop is actually completely software, and it is somewhere else, and it's very easy for people to control them and to provide security over them. So the idea is that you buy a very minimal PC, or not a PC at all. It's just what they call a dumb terminal. The terminal connects back to a server, and that server runs the operating system there, or a group of applications. So you could think about products like Scimitar or any of these things. They're all Citrix compliant, can be used that way so that folks can, access this. And it's actually another way of doing a very secure business, because the actual processing and everything is happening on this server and not on this local PC that, for many, many years was considered sort of the weakest point of the security paradigm, right? Because it's out at the edge of the network and someone could take it and it might have that software on it or whatever.
I remember, and this is me playing the dumb guy again, because I really don't know any better. I remember, whether it was advertising or whatever, the reference to Citrix server. So that's what you're doing. You're actually putting the software and creating a server that actually provides this capability with the software. Am I hearing that correct?
Right.
Okay.
So it would make sense that, so there was a 0-day called Citrix Bleed. Citrix Bleed is, that's a name of a security vulnerability that was discovered in Citrix networking products, particularly the application delivery controller. So if you heard what I just said, that one of the big, for example, let's say you had to update a piece of software on your entire fleet of PCs, right? In the old days, you would have to do this, kind of go system by system and update them. Then they sort of invented software that could do it. But then with the advent of, virtual desktops like Citrix, they were able to update that software locally or centrally, and everybody could see update immediately. And therefore, one of the things that's very cool is that, as the Citrix platform evolved over the years, they started building out Citrix gateways and application delivery controllers. So this particular vulnerability would allow attackers to perform unauthorized access or data. So basically, they could open up their own desktop, and if they had a desktop, they would essentially be a teller. And it would use sort of
makes sense. It's kind of becomes the nerve center. They've actually managed to work their way to the central nervous system.
Right, and it was being used as a 0-day starting in August of this year. So the fact that, and basically it became known, and I guess it had to be patched. Now, again, we don't know, but what I would get at is the way I think this would work is that you would use the Citrix Bleed to get into the platform. And then while nobody knew you were there, which presumably was from November 26th on, you do recon, right? You look around, you find out what you got into, because a lot of times hackers don't even know what they got into. They just get into a server and they go, oh, I got into something. What is it? And they start scanning the traffic and they start looking for data and they start trying to understand. They see names go by. They look them up on LinkedIn. They do a ton of research before they do anything, because the last thing you want to do is alert the people. It's like you snuck into the bank and you're hiding hiding in a closet, and you don't want anybody to know you're there, because you want to watch everybody go back and forth, and you want to watch what time they do things, and you want to understand what the opportunities are as a bad guy for you to take advantage of. With me so far?
I am. In fact, I just, again, make sure we're 100% clear. The Citrix Bleed is true. It's confirmed that there is such a thing as a Citrix Bleed that had to be dealt with on a security standpoint. What we don't know for a fact is that if that was the root cause of this specific situation.
Yeah, but
right.
And there are several articles in one of the publications that I know of that I look quite a bit, Cybersecurity Dive, which is I think a pretty good one. And they said that they quote ongoing operations as saying it's isolated to a segment of its network. And they also said that in this piece that they had 2 NetScalers. The NetScalers are basically very, very close, if not the same thing as the ADC, the application delivery controller. And so these NetScalers, what their job would have been is to, presumably to route everything back and forth through the various people and the various systems, which, by the way, the people who had this platform, were so lucky during the pandemic because they were already set up to work from home. So that
exactly.
It's good stuff. Yeah. It's
not good stuff and bad stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good stuff, and anything could be bad stuff because anybody can kind of go in there and grab it. So anyways, long story short, they
and again, the ongoing opera. This is where they said some things that have been said are not true. They don't seem to be like totally refuting and denying
yeah,
that Citrix is part of the problem, but they seem to be pushing back on exactly the way it's been characterized in the press. So take that for what
right.
it's worth. They could be parsing words, who knows? But
Yeah, and so Cybersecurity Dive's exact quote was, and this is from the 4th of December, ongoing operations, 2 NetScaler devices remain offline. This is disrupting operations in a way that impacts, it says millions of Americans, but if there were only 93,000 people amongst all those craters, then that's all it could be. And that they last modified their Citrix Scaler application on May 12th, according to logs posted by Beaumont. I don't know who Beaumont is. I guess I should look into it. But and how he got the logs, I don't know, unless he knows something about it, which wouldn't be good. So anyways, long story short, the guys get in there, they start poking around. They God knows, what they had access to, because it looks like it's just literally, 100% access. But then at some point they get what they want, and then they decide, okay, it's getting hot around here. We don't want to get caught. So what do? We hand it over to a ransomware group. And then the ransomware, which has been, there was a ransomware attack using Citrix Bleed against Boeing, against Fidelity National Financial.
that's right. FIS. Yeah, they got hit,
Yeah.
which is, I think, is important, because I'm sure that at some point some narrative is going to twist to these little credit unions that are understaffed and don't have enough talent, and they can't get.
Yeah, and that's just not true.
That's
That's
not
not
it.
true.
Look at Boeing. Look at these big players.
This could have happened to anybody, right? And so, and at that point, they probably handed it over to the other half of their operations, said, okay, we're done, collecting all the apples and fruit we can get. Now it's your turn to go in and shut these guys down and make them pay.
That's interesting. I
And
had not actually thought. So you're saying that most likely these are two discrete exercises, that by the time someone, turned the crank from the ransomware side, they'd already done some other stuff by nosing around, is what you're saying.
I would guess,
In all
I
likelihood.
don't know for sure, but in all likelihood, that's what I would have
That is,
thought,
I
because-
had not put that together. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so and this is from Kevin, the guy that he posted this on X. Just
I always trust anybody named Kevin on X. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right, yeah, all the Kevins are all so well. But yeah, he did apparently somehow pull down their cert from their NetScaler, which is probably workspace prod cloudworks.com. Okay, so yeah, what he did was he just went out to the DNS services and looked for it, but he did post quite a bit of stuff here. So anyways, long story short, let's just double Pulsar, which is probably another platform, but it's not just, again, this ransomware stuff. The Citrix Bleed ransomware group is not just financial services, hospitals, and we talked about Boeing. So something like that sounds like what might have happened. It sounded like these two devices may have been, because they're open to the web. They're not open to the web, but they're out there for that very reason, to establish communication with the grains, and they're set to be secure. But if there's something that nobody knows about, that they can get in.
Or something, I thought what I saw at one point is something unpatched potentially.
Maybe I don't want to jump to that conclusion.
No, you're right. You're right. That's
my knowledge of the ongoing guys is they're pretty dang good at patching. So
good point.
I don't know for sure. So, but yeah, that's what we know. And so I guess
go ahead. Sorry.
I think the moral of this story is that, I think one, it makes a point for decentralization at some point. I still think that's a big something people have to look at. And then I think the other point it makes is that, I think that eventually, and I've said this before, and I don't know if you've seen the 60 Minutes this past weekend about quantum computing. It was fantastic. They did a really good job of explaining it. I love the maze example that the researcher used, but I think figuring out quantum resistant encryption for data at rest is going to have to be a higher priority in the future.
The two things that come, well, first off, obviously job one is getting these credit unions back online. So, I mean, and I'm glad to see we're starting to make motion in that direction. The other piece, and it's already alluded to in some of the statements by the NCUA, this is going to give the NCUA a much larger stick that they want to wave in terms of getting third-party vendor authority, in terms of authorization to really look at them and get comfortable. Because that's been an ongoing challenge. They say they're the only of the financial services regulators that don't have that authority. So I suspect we're going to be hearing a lot more about that in the coming months as well.
Well, and but I'll say this about the NCUA too, not to defend them, but that one, they warned in August that there was an increase against credit unions. I saw it. I remember thinking, because there's always been this idea that eventually bad guys would move, instead of banging their head against Bank of America that has $10 billion to throw against the security, why wouldn't you move down the food chain? So which would you rather? Would you rather, kill one elephant, but it takes you a year, or you could kill 50 rabbits and that takes you 3 months, right? And then the Move It platform issue can't happen. If you remember, we talked about Move It. Move It is a software that people use for secure transfers. Like, oh, I want to send you this in email, but I don't want it to go through the open email. Okay, well, use this Move It, platform, and you put the software on there, and it goes back and forth. So,
thinking, as I always do, I'm thinking about the music analogy. I mean, these hackers, they're going to play the small clubs in town first before they progress to playing the arenas and the stadiums.
Exactly. So NCUA did warn in August that they were seeing these things, and that we're going to see quite a bit more. And there's been a few credit unions that have announced it. The Ransom House Extortion Group added Jefferson Credit Union to its list of victims in 2022. Envision Credit Union was another one. They announced this. These are credit unions that announced it themselves.
This is different. This is not the current event, right?
No, it's not the current event. But where I'm going with this is that I feel like two things the NCUA is, I think, usually does a good job of is, one, identifying what they consider to be systemic threats to the entire credit union system. And that means if you have a provider that's providing over X amount of services to over X amount of critical services to over X amount of credit unions, then they're considered a systemic event. And I know from experience that you get the holy crap audited out of you by these guys, and rightly so. Yeah. So I guess I want to make a point that I just, in my heart of hearts here, and me, I'm the kind of guy that would call it out if I thought it was a thing. I just don't think there was a malfeasance here. I think that
totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, there never is. And I mean, I'm thinking that, I'm thinking back to things like the Target breach, the Heartland breach. I mean, in no case.
But what I do think is that because of this apparent new focus on the credit union space, that I worry from a resource standpoint that particularly the small to medium-sized credit unions, which I define up to 500 million, they're going to need to look at having some extra services in order to deal with these issues. And I'll tell you what I think's behind it. You want to know what I think's behind it? Can you guess what I think's behind it?
George Soros.
Nope. It's AI. It's AI. Right?
Okay.
And let me explain to you how. I think that stuff that used to take 6 months to figure out, to find a 0-day vulnerability, now with an AI platform, you can find it in maybe a week or less.
That's interesting. And we're not even talking ChatGPT. It doesn't have to be the consumer-facing stuff. These people are sophisticated enough to go and
you could download a model, you could train your own model.
Consumer interface. Yeah.
I guarantee you right now, there's some bad guys right now working on, I don't know, I'll call it, cyber hack, GPT, and its whole purpose in life is to review source code that they've stolen from organizations, which is, what happened with, with the guys from SolarWinds. If you remember, they found a dude who was, one of their main programmers at a hotel somewhere doing legitimate business, completely locked down, but they got into it. And then once they got the code, they had to go through it line by line meticulously because they didn't have the software. Well, guess what? Now you can probably plug it right into an AI agent and let it do it and find even more vulnerabilities than the human would find.
Yeah.
And so I just think that, I think I think AI is like this turbo sauce that we're adding to everything, and everything's going to go faster. And unfortunately, that means everybody's got to respond faster, be more reactive, pardon me, more proactive and less reactive, and that there's going to be more resource associated with it.
Sounds to me like we've got another entree into next week's episode about the biggest stories, obviously one of the big ones of 2023. And actually another linkage, when you talk about AI, I wanted to take a second to go back and revisit last week's story about OpenAI and all the drama and intrigue there. A couple of things that popped up. One, there's a great piece in the New Yorker which gets a little bit more into speculation, because we tried to stay as just the facts as we possibly could in our episode last week, which seems to have gotten a lot of great response. Appreciate everybody's comments on that, but we'll post a link to that too. But just today, before we recorded, one of the three board members who has since left, but one of the two that seemed to be at the height of the struggle and the drama, a woman named Helen Toner, is Australian and more from the academic side. She gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal. First time I think anybody has spoken on the record about some of the intrigue. And she didn't get into a lot of the detail of it, but she did really kind of clarify some of the points about what was going on over there. And she kind of confirmed the whole notion of the natural tension between the original not-for-profit view of the effective altruism that they were using, the premise of the original mission, versus the for-profit mission of OpenAI. So that, I think, is definitely worth taking a look at. One of the things at the very end of the story that I found fascinating, because we talked about this natural kind of incompatibility between the not-for-profit mission and the for-profit one. Somebody in the article pointed out that maybe a model to look at is Mozilla. And Mozilla started as a pure nonprofit. When Firefox took off and they wanted to start generating revenue with it, they actually set up a separate board. It's a subsidiary board to the not-for-profit, but it is a separate board, and it is staffed with different people with a slightly different mission and charter. So it'll be interesting to see if that may be part of the direction of where they go. She also got a little bit more. She wasn't going to air this kind of dirty laundry in the article, but they had another couple unnamed sources that basically said that it wasn't literally the concern about OpenAI and the ChatGPT about to destroy humanity. It was more about Sam Altman going behind the scenes and trying to turn the board members against each other in an attempt to get people ousted. And then they kind of talked among themselves and realized that they were being played off each other, and that's when they actually took action. So it was interesting.
So I have a movie that you should watch.
And it's called
The Creator. It's about AI. It's fascinating.
Oh,
it's a fascinating
I remember
movie.
that one. Okay, we'll put a link.
It's a newer one, but I really thought it was really interesting. I caught it on a plane on a flight back from Portland this week, and I thought it was a very interesting piece. Well, I think we've done our best to update here. I want to say that I wish those credit unions that are struggling with this the best of luck, and certainly Big can help if you need our assistance. We do security reviews and those sorts of things on a regular basis. One of my many things that I like to. I don't know about that, but it is certainly in our platform to try to help folks out with that. Particularly, looking for opportunities to be more proactive about these things, which I think is probably the biggest play. But anyways, Glenn, where can people find you if they need them some Glenn? How do they get them?
Come to Glenn.com. No, 154 Advisors, probably the best ways on LinkedIn these days. But I always point people to the website, big-fintech.com, media tab, find me there.
Yeah, absolutely. And same here for me. You can also find me on X when I'm not Xing on JB Fintech at JB Fintech. And obviously you can go to the big-fintech.com website. Again, just want to say I'm sorry this happened at Christmas and this time frame for the folks, the members and the credit unions. It's a terrible thing, but it sounds like they got it under control. So that's great.
Happier stuff next week. And I think the Binance topic we didn't get to we'll cover as well as part of the 2023 recap.
I think we should. I think we should. So tune in to find out what the heck happened at Binance. Crypto's crumbling, all the bad guys are being thrown out, and now what's going to be left is the good stuff. You heard it here first. Come talk to me.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big FinTech, email info@big-fintech.com, or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.